So we're continuing on the bottom of page 31. And almost coming to an end of this chapter, the chapter on prajna. So, we're right in the last paragraph. Good and wise friends, when you contemplate and illuminate with a wisdom that clearly penetrates both inside and outside, you can discern your original mind. So here, the Sixth Patriarch is kind of doing two things. On one hand, in the passage before, he was saying, this understanding, this insight, this prajna, is already completely with us, and we should just recognize this. This is what he continues to say, or Jin, to see it directly for ourselves, by ourselves. And then the previous passage he was saying, if, however, for some reason you can't do that directly, you need to seek out a mentor, trustworthy, good and wise, wholesome, insightful teacher who then can lead you to or stimulate this capacity within and help it then arise and permeate your own being. So the important thing here is that this wisdom can't come from without. It has to be awakened, opened up, released within. And all the sage does, or the good and wise advisor, the teacher, is to find all kinds of expedient devices, skillful means to trigger that, to catalyze it. Now this next passage where he starts here, on one hand, it seems as if he's going to step into the role of being a Kalyana Mitra, a wise advisor. He's going to give some instructions. So this passage starts out almost like telling us how to do this. At the same time, he could be, you might say, reminding us how we can do it ourselves. So it's a little bit of both. On one hand, he seems to be advising here. On the other hand, he seems to be pointing that the advisor isn't needed if you could just do it yourself. So there's a double tone here. He says, when you contemplate, in other words, you are doing this, right? You are contemplating. Well, if you're not, then you should. He's not saying you should. He says, when you contemplate, meaning this is part of your regular daily routine, right? So I usually ask people, how's it going? And they'll say, yeah, kind of, are you kind of contemplating things as they go along? Huh? Well, do you sit regularly? Do you have a regular sitting practice? Now, that doesn't mean the same as contemplate, but it's indicative of doing some exercise in the day where you try to stop the mad mind from just running amok and look at it a little bit. No, I actually stopped. When did you stop? When everything got kind of messy. So, well, if you get sick, do you stop taking medicine? No, it's when you're sick that you want to take the medicine. So when you're confused and not contemplating and just being swept along, you might think of doing the expedient device of anchoring your daily routine in some sitting meditation or bowing or something that gets the mad mind out of the swirl for just a minute so you can take stock. My mother, and I love her dearly, but she would do this thing of, she'd be sick, and I'd say, Mom, you need to go see a doctor. Oh, I can't go to see a doctor. Why? Because I'm sick. I'll go when I'm feeling better. There was some logic to that she used it, and I couldn't argue against it because I look terrible. I don't feel good. Why would I go out and see a doctor? Anyhow, so the same thing here. He's saying when you contemplate, meaning you're doing this, right? And illuminate. So there's two things going on. You could take this to be zhi and guan, the contemplating being the stopping. You're pausing to reflect, and you're illuminating. You're using the light that comes from that gathering of your energy and calming the mind creates a light. It's really interesting. It's not like things become dull. Actually, when you do the exercise correctly, if you follow the techniques, in doing this stilling of the mind, there is an incredible activity that then happens of insight. There's penetrating seeing going on in the stilling. It almost seems contradictory. But that's why the use of the mind this way is activating a higher potential by stilling it in certain other ways. Whereas normally we think we stimulate our mind and get it really active, that we're acquiring and really taking in a lot. But in fact, from this point of view, we're just scattering awareness and consciousness. So he says, when you contemplate and illuminate, and with the wisdom, so the wisdom is referring to both the theory that you'd be reading, the sort of principles, guiding principles that would come out of these, let's say, these wisdom texts, but more importantly, the wisdom that arises from the contemplating and illumination. So this is again another statement of what's called the San Wu Luo Shui, the three interacting, non-outflowing exercise or study. But study here, Shui, doesn't just mean like reading a text. Study in this tradition means a combination of studying or learning and self and cultivation in regards to a dialogue between you and the text. So it's not just abstractly reading the text, but it's taking it as an actual food that's transforming you as you absorb it into your consciousness, into your emotions. So it's a really interesting process. That's what shui, to study, meant. It didn't mean simply to go to the library, but it meant to transform through a process of informed learning and really a kind of bittersweet taking stock of your faults, bad habits, and emotional attachments and whatnot, and rectifying those, getting those in balance. And so he says, when you do that, there's a wisdom, and that wisdom penetrates. So again, the next thing is, it's not just that it scans a light over the surface of things, but it's a penetrating light. It sees through. It's able to see through the veil, if you want to say, of illusion, the veil of, some people call Maya, the veil of illusion. There's different ways of referring to it, but it's the mere appearance of things rather than the substance behind them. And so when you penetrate, and it says both inside and outside. Now what does this mean? Penetrate both inside and outside.
You're trying to figure that.
You're trying to figure what out?
Inside and outside.
What does inside and outside mean?
Like
inside the house, outside the house?
both your inside your mind and then whatever the outside condition, external conditions are?
Well, it's.
Are you asking us what we've asked Ananda?
See, this is quick because the Buddha said, "Well, Ananda, contemplate your mind," and he says, "Well, where are you contemplating?" "Well, I'm looking inside," and the Buddha says, "Well, your mind's inside then?" "Well, yeah, kind of, but it's not real." "Well, maybe it's outside." So where is the mind? Is it inside or outside? Yeah, careful you don't bite on these things. Ananda had trouble with this. We might also if we try to take it on. It's a figure of speech, okay? There is no inside and outside, literally. Now, we think there's an inside and outside, but that's actually Huangqiang. That's actually false thinking or deluded thinking. Wait. There's an inside and an outside. Very clearly, I know this. There's an exit and an egress, buildings have an inside and outside. But in this ultimate sense, there is no inside or outside. I know that sounds a little strange because we're so where's the inside and outside of your body? Let's just start with that, because everybody will say, well, my mind could be anywhere. It could be inside, outside, all over the place. But my body is clearly here. But your body, actually, our bodies, are constantly interacting with the four elements inside and outside. So you're constantly taking in the outside through air. If you want to test that, just stop breathing, and you realize, oh yeah, the outside's kind of important to the inside. Right? So you're taking in air and you're giving off gas. And the gas you're giving off, maybe plants take in, so your inside becomes outside, your outside becomes their inside. That's interesting. We're constantly taking in water or evaporating water as we sit here. Earth, constantly taking in food and getting rid of it, the substances of things. Fire, we're constantly gaining or losing, putting on, we contain it, we go out, we gather from the inside, we put it outside. The four elements are constantly interacting, constantly. And so our bodies are not so much self-contained, hermetically sealed things that we think they are, but they're porous membranes, actually much more porous than we realize, and we're constantly working the four elements inside. So inside and outside is really not accurate to say it exists, right? So you get a disease, where did it come from? Well, it's kind of inside, you take it in, or outside, and now it becomes inside, and then and then it becomes outside, and somebody else gets it, and this is a kind of transference, it spreads around. So we know that the way the world works, the way the elements mix, not just through this planet, but into the whole cosmos. And so the whole cosmos is like a breathing, living, what do you want to call it, entity or phenomena that's constantly inside and outside are going all the time. And so when you breathe your last breath and there's no more, then all of these elements, they last forever. No, they dissolve and go back into these elemental mixtures. So that's why there's this thought that, on the tip of your nose, the hydrocarbon that's there might at some point been on some distant star way out there. And in the mix of things, as they mix around, finally end up on the tip of your nose, right? Or the hydrocarbon that's out there someplace else will in some future time end up to be part of your fingernail or something. And so this mixture, this constant going there is no inside and outside, but this is a figure of speech. And it's a figure of speech to get us to contemplate in this way. Where is inside, where is outside? So you could use this as a meditation topic. What is me, what is other? Well, that's interesting, because me is also a relational entity. We are simultaneously the sum total of our relationships. Fathers, sons, mothers, daughters, husbands, wives, friends, students, teachers. We're all in a relational nexus, and we define ourselves by this interaction of our relationships. And if one of those relationships change, we become something different. If someone dies that's close to you, you are different because they died. Not because you died, but somehow a relational thing. So when the mother loses a child, the mother is a different person than she was when she had the child. The relationship changes. And so we are not autonomous sort of monads, but we are constantly not only in the natural world in relationship to all the elements, we're in the social world, the relationship to all the various peoples that we have in our lives. When one's added, we're enhanced, and when one's taken away, we're less. That's why there's a great poem by John Donne, who's an interesting poet, quite old, so I'm sure anybody here read John Donne? Oh, come on, you can admit it, we're not anti-intellectual here. No? A little bit. Idiot. John Donne has a wonderful poem. Basically, there's a church bell ringing in the village, and it's ringing very slowly. And this is the title of the poem, For Whom the Bell Tolls, so you might have heard that. Hemingway stole it from John Donne, by the way. And the poem starts with this person contemplating why the bell's tolling. And the bell's tolling because there's a funeral going on. And when the funeral goes on, at least where I grew up in a kind of semi-agrarian village, when there was a funeral, then the church bell would toll, and you could hear it for miles around. And it would toll at a very slow... So when it was time, it would go ding-dong, 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 and then bong, 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 3 o'clock. But when somebody died, it was bong, bong, really slow. And so whatever we were doing, we'd stop. Or my grandmother would make us stop and said, listen. And you'd listen and you'd count. So that was always fun. There was no iPod or iPad, you just go, who died, what's happening? No, you have to listen and you count. And each count was a year. Each bell toll was a year. So then you count, and if you got up to 13, somebody 13 died. So you're going 13, 14, and it was somebody 80 or 90, this could be a long wait, boom, boom. And then everybody in the village knew the general age of the person who died and might even think, oh, that's Mary or John or anyhow. And so John Donne's poem starts with, no man's an island, no one stands alone, every person's a piece of a continent, a part of the main. If a clod of dirt be washed away by the sea, Europe is less. I mean, in other words, if a little piece of land gets washed away by the sea, the continent of Europe is less. As well as if there's a promontory, like a huge piece of land that goes, or a manor of thy friends, or your own piece of property or something. So if you live in Malibu or whatnot, or Marin, you can see it can go right into the sea. And then the poem goes on, every man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. So whenever anybody dies, it diminishes me because I am part of this relational nexus. And then his last line is, therefore, do not send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. That's the end of his poem. And his poem says, so don't go to the church to ask for who died, because whoever died was part of you. So this relational thing is brought home in this poem. So this poem by John Donne is hinting at this idea there's no inside and outside. And therefore this, either at the physical, in the material, or at the natural and social world, but even at the psychological, we are also interconnected, interrelating. So this is it. So when he says contemplate inside, the traditional way of talking about this, and it becomes a Buddhist reflection, is the inside is body and mind, and the outside is the world. And these are called the three. Inside body, mind, and world. And you begin a contemplation, you say, this body, you look in and you clearly, as if you're looking through glass, you clearly look, what is this body? What is it made of? How stable and solid is it? What's going on? And this mind, what is this mind? So if you really start to contemplate the body and mind, it's very elusive. You know, where is it? What is it doing? How is it shifting and changing? And where do I belong? Where do I locate my identity? Is it in the physical? Is it in the mental? But the mental is, well, the Chan master used to say it's a heap of snot and a puff of wind. So the heap of snot is the body and the puff of wind. That got your attention, a heap of snot and a puff of wind. So on your Valentine you say, dear heap of snot and puff of wind, I love you. No. It's a contemplation to show you that there's nothing solid and real about it. So if you try to go inside and look at body and mind, where can you set up? Where can you establish this permanent sense? On the other hand, when you look outside, and this means to contemplate the larger world, and you can actually use science in many ways to do this. Science can be a contemplation of the larger natural world, biology, physics, and whatnot, and you use it to go out and you contemplate the nature of things. And what he's saying here is when you do this, if you do it properly, you're both going to be upset and a little bit disjointed, and then if you really stay with it, you'll be liberated. So this is why he's going over to the next. Recognizing your original mind is the fundamental liberation. We're moving on. And this liberation itself is the prajna samadhi. This is no thought. Okay, so this is thick. It's interesting that he says if you contemplate them correctly and you see, for example, they exist, the body exists, the mind exists, and the world exists, but not in isolation from each other. So there's actually no separation between body, mind, and world. This is very interesting. I mean, we can get a sense of this, and yet our ego consciousness keeps resisting that. And yet the nature of reality keeps pushing it at us. It's really funny. It's like we think we're scientific and logical and objective. And if we're that way, we see that body, mind, and world are a continuum. They're a distributed property. And there's no isolated self-existing anywhere to that. It's just a mix of interchanging, interdependent phenomena, right? We know that. If you're an environmentalist, you got to believe that. The smokestack that shoots up the stuff doesn't stay just in your smokestack. It spreads all over the universe. Atomic pollution in one place ends up on the tallest mountains of Canada, right? I mean, we know this. This is the nature, the interchangeability of matter and energy. So this being the fact, when you contemplate them this way, the first thing is the sense of self isn't so sure here. It gets kind of lost. But that losing, he says, is the beginning of wisdom. Because now you're locating you in the larger scheme of things, and it's in this larger scheme of things that the true you, whatever that is more existing than in this isolated thing that we've created. So, therefore, he says, recognizing this as your original mind is the fundamental liberation. So we do this contemplation. What's happening is the liberation that results is not a liberation of getting what you want. Often freedom gets translated, I got what I want. I'm free to get what I want. But ironically here, in this sense, the freedom is letting go of what you are not. So the freedom is, the liberation is not so much you're free to reach out or you're free to acquire, but the liberation is the letting go or the unshackling of self-imposed restrictions and limitations. It's very important, and why the opposite of wisdom, of course, is, people will say, well, let's do a better translation. Opposite of wisdom? Don't say non-wisdom, please. Well, sometimes they say ignorance or foolishness or confusion, or maybe delusion, I think is better. Because ignorance is kind of pejorative, it's a little judgmental. But delusion means not quite seeing it clearly, kind of obscured. This is, the root of this, of course, is avidya, which I think means to not see clearly. So it's not you're stupid, it's just that you're occluded in the way you're looking at things. So here he's saying this wisdom, when you see things clearly, is liberation. And the opposite of liberation is not seeing things clearly. So instead of reflecting and penetrating, we're projecting. So we're using our consciousness to project self and others, me, mind, body, world, what I want, and so forth. That's a projection, and then the projection leads to a kind of, my teacher used to call it a corporation. You incorporate. You incorporate with the outside world. That belongs to me and that's mine. Or she or he belongs to me and they're mine. Or this or that belongs to me and it's mine. So the mind goes out, it projects, and it establishes links with the sensory world. And this is the 18 realms interacting, the sense organs, the sense objects, and the consciousness is the glue that holds this whole thing together. But it's a dream, illusion, bubble, shadow. Just like a snowflake is held together for a certain while, and then, well, snow. Here I'm in Berkeley talking about snow again. Let's see. A fog. Okay, so the fog comes in, and the fog seems powerful and real, and yet the fog vanishes. It's there, and yet it's not there. So is everything that we project, seemingly that way. And that's why we get upset. The reason we get upset is because even though we want to hold fast to it, it won't stay. Damn, it's frustrating. And we insist that it stay. We command it to stay. Well, in various ways. Or we command him or this or that to stay, or youth to stay, or whatever. And they won't stay. And it's very frustrating because this lack of control creates an anxiety, and that anxiety creates more wanting of control and more dominance and so forth, and this spiral just goes on and on. And that's the opposite of liberation. Because now we're getting tied up in pursuing things we cannot possibly get and trying to control things that we cannot dominate. And this is a loser. I'm sorry. It's a real losing. But this is, much of human activity consists of that. The penultimate of this is, I am not going to die. I'm going to beat this thing called death. So tonight I wanted to share, if there's some time, I want to share a reflection I had because a scientist friend of mine, he's really great, but he's really a material scientist. And so he's not interested in religion at all, but he's sort of interested in Buddhism because it doesn't seem like religion to him, but he's not sure. So every time we have, he's French, so he cooks us really good food. Every time we have a really good meal, and he says, now let me ask you, did the Buddha create this world or what? You know, and I come back and he says, well, let's see, let me ask you. And he keeps coming. So he sent me this article to read, and it's some of his friends who are, because he was a big founder in the Silicon Valley thing back in the 60s, 70s. And so he knows all these people. And he says, look at some of my colleagues, what they're doing. So I'll share that with you tonight. And he was asking me, so what would Buddha say about this? Let me get to that later. So he says, this liberation itself is prajna samadhi. Prajna samadhi means a abiding, if you can call it that, in an equanimity of mind that sees things as they really are all the time, 24/7. So this penetrating wisdom he's calling becomes a kind of samadhi, an unchanging, solid perception that doesn't go up and down by fears, emotions, wants, or anything like this, or habitual tendencies. This is almost like a mirror that is never cloudy, it's never foggy, it's constantly just reflecting what's in front of it. Things come and go, but they don't stick to the mirror. And the mirror does not become tarnished by what it reflects on. This is what he's calling this penetrating wisdom. And therefore he calls it a kind of samadhi. Sometimes samadhi means to people a kind of withdrawal from reality, almost an absorption into a transcendental state, or a narrowing down of consciousness to something very specific. But samadhi, in the sense that the Sixth Patriarch uses it, and in its broadest reach, is talking about a state of mind that is constant and unchanging rather than entered or left. And it's a state that sees things really, really clearly, and therefore is not moved by them in the sense of being stirred or moved off center, but still responds. So we'll see what he does by this. Now he calls this no thought. Now we'll have to come back to no thought, because it's something we wrestle with in the translation, and we're just going to leave it as it is, but try to explain what he means. He says, what is no thought, in case you were wondering, right? Because it would seem like, okay, you just described samadhi as this unflappable, let's use that, an unflappable awareness. And now you say it's no thought. Well, no thought sounds like not unflappable awareness. It sounds like you just turned off the screen and you dulled everything. And therefore, everything's okay. Why is everything okay? I don't feel anything, don't see anything, I don't know anything, I have no thoughts. Well, of course, then you're like a piece of wood and a rock, and that's what no thought might convey, but that's not what he means by no thought, even though he says no thought. If you can view, okay, what is no thought? It's viewing. Whoops, wait a minute, it's viewing. To view means you better be alive. You don't view when you're dead, at least as far as one would surmise. You can ask dead people if they're viewing. You can view all dharmas with an unattached mind. This is no thought. Whoa. This is very different. You are looking at phenomena, all conditioned things, including your states of mind, with an unattached consciousness, an unattached awareness. That means you see, and you see very clearly. It's not like you see through it with a kind of tinted lens. It's seeing it as it really is, and that's no thought. So this no thought is almost like, you could say pure thought. Pure in the sense that it's not projecting, it's not expecting, it's not lingering, it's not holding, it's not wanting, it's not seeking. It's pretty cold in the sense of just impartially reflecting. And that's thought. So this is actually, almost you could say from our point of view, a heightened awareness rather than a dumbed down or dull awareness. And the heightened awareness requires you not only to observe, but to observe the observer while the observer is observing, to see if the observer is being moved by what it's observing. So this is pretty complex. And the sage is saying, oh, it's very childlike. You just made it complex because you let it go rusty for so long. But it's actually first thought, sometimes, yeah.
There's a similar term in the Rig Veda, it's amati.
Mm-hmm.
It literally means not thought, but I translate it as not yet thought.
Ah, that's good.
It's kind of the information that's coming through before a concept is formed in the mind. So if you can catch it and observe it, which is what these seers are trying to do, then it doesn't kind of formalize into an actual thought, and you can use that energy in different ways.
This is interesting. It is thinking, but it's thinking in a way that we normally don't associate. So between the observation and the judgment, between the observation and saying, don't, or I want, there's this not yet.
It's a potential energy.
Yeah.
This word occurs 3 times in the Rig Veda, and it's always associated with Savitr, who's supposedly impelling this kind of energy or urging to do things and whatnot. It's a really interesting term.
It's a very interesting, and this is where translation skill has to go if we're going to psychologically render these things in dynamic, liberating language as opposed to dull kinds of states of unawareness, tuning out, I'm in Samadhi, and it's like, no, you're in Samadhi, it's like well, look at his line here. The mind is everywhere engaged but is nowhere attached. What a great description. It's everywhere engaged, taking in, but nowhere attached, not yet taking, not yet rejecting. That is liberation. It's almost like it's really wonderful. It says it's like the moon going through the sky. The moon passes through the sky. Storms come and go, clouds come and go, and yet the moon just keeps going. This bright orb, it's moving, it's everywhere, but nowhere attached. It doesn't cling. How does that happen? How does the moon... This is one of the metaphors from the Chan school, that the moon is constantly just moving through empty space, moving through a lot of empty space, but nowhere attaching, nowhere stopping, yet it's there. So it has this imagery. Also, they say it's like the clouds. The mountain poets use the clouds moving through the trees. They move through and they move on. The mountain's there, and the clouds come against them, and they move on. The sun rises, it's on the mountain. The sun sets, it leaves the mountain. So these images in the poetry of nature are trying to describe something that is alert, aware, engaged, at the same time not clinging, holding. So it's not like the mountains try to say, sun, stay. We like the warmth, don't go. Everything just sort of moves in its cycles and its rhythms. And getting in tune with that is the beginning of wisdom. It's not the end of wisdom, it's the beginning, yes.
Just to bring in the science part of this space between no thought and thought, I read once that the way our brain works, according to scientists, is that we don't take in sensory information and see it in this amorphous state and then figure out what it is. We have an almost immediate brain leap to saying, sounds like a car accident, sounds like something. In other words, the perception happens almost before the ability to see before the thought, which means that we're describing a pretty darn tricky thing to get in the middle of.
Well, not only that, but the actual alerting to it is already a filtering device. So what do we actually pay attention to is already a precognitive habitual pattern. It's really interesting. So it's not like, oh, hark, I hear. The very fact that I pay attention to, and it's within a certain decibel of range. And outside those, we don't hear. It was very interesting. And within a certain range of light, we don't see at the sub or supersonic or whatever at the spectrum. And then we say, that's the world, what I know and see. And we smell within that. Go out for a walk with a dog. It's like, you're pulling the dog. Stop, what are you doing? The dog is in this world of these smells, 60 times greater than our nose, which is the best nose in the world, of course, is ours. And deer are 60 times more than dogs. So, and we say there's nothing going on, and they're going, wow, it's wild out here with smells, right? And it's wild out there with sounds, but we don't hear except a certain range, and we call that the world. And so the very cognitive structure that we have with our body is already a limited tool of acquiry. It's not the ultimate thing we think it is. And then if we further limit our consciousness by attachments and whatnot, we can see how consciousness is collapsing down to this very narrow range of possibilities. And so it's someone once described perception, our very act of perceiving. And then, as you say, we do something where we arrange it and then we have a pattern that develops. Cognition is largely a process of memory and inference. And so what it means is that, as James said, there's this bewildering, blooming mass of phenomena going on at any one moment. Not if you're stoned, even when you're normal. Now, he wrote this, he might have been under nitrous oxide, but it was, never mind. He saw that the world was this blooming, wild phenomena of sight, sound, smell, taste, and going on. And he says, we'd be overwhelmed if we don't start to put it into categories. And so our consciousness takes us down and attends to only this and doesn't attend to that. And as we get older and mature, our attention frames a reality that's manageable to us. And then, because there's so much and we can't constantly process it immediately, we retain it and put it into memory things, and then we use inference to tie those things together. And that's why you can have an event go A, B, C, D, and once you got it there, you see A and you'll go to D. But if you take out the B and the C in between, you don't notice. This is called selective inattention. It's really interesting neurologically because the pattern has been set up and you're used to the pattern, so you can take B and C out. And I told you the exercise, they do this. They do this exercise, they're saying, okay, these people, all of you people over there, I'm going to give you a ball. And you bounce the ball around, and I want you to, count how many times it bounces around. And so you're really good, your attention. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they run a film, okay, and the people are done. They say, how many times? 33. Right. And you were watching all the time. Yes. Did you see the gorilla? What? Did you see the gorilla? No, it's no gorilla. Yes, there was a gorilla. No way. So they run the film back. And they say, this time, don't count the ball, just kind of watch. And sure enough, this person dressed up in a gorilla suit walks through the audience while the ball's bouncing. And you don't see it because your attention is focused on the ball. This is funny. The not funny part of this, it happens to fighter pilots who are dropping bombs. So it's carried over now to a negative connotation where the expectation that this is the enemy and the enemy does this has led to both collateral damage and bombing of innocent civilians because the cognitive patterns in their training are set up to see and pay attention to only certain things and disregard the rest. So I'm digressing. I didn't mean to do this, but your point brings up a very interesting point. Even at the physical material level, the cognitive functionings that we have in the 5 skandhas themselves are limited, sometimes unreliable, distorted, but certainly narrow. And they're narrowed further. What the Buddha is saying, or the Sixth Patriarch is saying, is even if you can let go and expand those and open them up to their ultimate capacity, you're still within that limitation unless you're actually bringing wisdom to bear on that perceptual process and have some idea of the very nature of the reality that you're observing. Because if you don't have clarity about that, all you're getting is a better focus on the absurd or a better focus on, how you would say, samsara or phenomenal changes, but you're not seeing past the surface. That's why even extensions of the senses, microscope, telescope, only continue that sort of narrow range of taking in. And at what point can we really take it all in? What device is there going to be that will allow us to take it all in and see it truly as it is? Now, there's 2 trains of thought on this. One thought says those cute little guys with the white coats in the labs will find it. And the sagely tradition says they're not going to find it because they're trying to find what can't be found from this. So no matter how far they push that envelope, there's no way to really get outside of the limitations of an ego-centered consciousness. Now, if you shift that consciousness, then you can see that. But that is a little different than contemporary science is constructed. So this is an interesting tension or paradigm that's really coming to a head in our times. But, in the Middle Ages, people thought it was coming to a head in their times too. So 200 years hence, we'll still think it's coming together. And we'll still be waiting for Godot and science to come to the answer of these things. But that gets me to my point tonight. So let me digress here. Okay, I'll take a little time. So my friend sends me this article. And basically, there's a whole lot of money. These are friends of his, okay? So I guess I shouldn't name names because it's being recorded. So let's just think the high-end people in Silicon Valley that are making lots and lots of money, and you all know their names. Some of them have races with boats, and some of them have charitable foundations. And, so just, I didn't say any names. I just said these are friends of his. And he said they're uploading people's memories to a computer now versus the idea before of cryo-freezing the body. So the earlier version of this was cryogenics. What is that right? Cryogenics. And cryogenics means you would freeze a part of your body just before you die, and then with the hope that 100 years hence they would find a cure for whatever that was, and then you would bring your body back and reconstitute it. Now, you all have this, right? This is part of your HMO. So yeah, you use liquid nitrogen, I guess, and you freeze your body if you have the money. If you don't have the money, then you just freeze a part of your body. So which part do you think you want to come back? Your heart, your kidney, your liver. There's only so much space. You got a lot of money, you can buy a bigger, anyhow. And then, of course, you have to have backup systems because if the liquid nitrogen goes out, you're lost. So this is the idea. Now, others are saying the new move is in the neurological freezing. So instead of doing the body, some people actually do their brains. So they actually have their brains taken out right at that moment and frozen cryogenically. And then with the idea that 200 years hence, when they find a cure, the elixir of immortality, they will reconstitute you and your old brain will be there. Now, nobody's thought about the complications of this, in a new body with an old brain. Whoa, it's sort of like, when people first discovered atomic bombs, it was like there was these almost space-age weapons with Stone Age mentality. The combination was deadly. You punch me, I punch you. Okay, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. H-bomb for A-bomb. Whoa, the mentality with the technology out of sync here is a problem. But an old brain with a new body, I don't know. It's like giving a kid a Maserati. Anyhow, so you instead of freeze the body, you download the memory into a chip, a software program of some type. And the object of this is to get them into these programs or algorithms or some big data holding thing, and then to be able to understand and upgrade, this is the language you use, to understand and upgrade what they consider the most complicated piece of machinery in existence, the human body and its mind. So this is contemplating insight. You upgrade it. So they're trying to find ways to digitize your brain based on the theory that your mind could live long after your body expires. This is prajna.
Download a memory. Yeah, right. How close are they?
Actually, there's a movie about transcendent.
There's a movie about this. Okay. We'll plug movies later. I mean, trailers. So one of these people, I'm not going to say his name, says, I believe that evolution is a true account of nature, but I think we should try to escape it or transcend it. So this person gave $430 million to an anti-aging research. So the beginning of this is to slow down the aging process. By the way, this is not a new idea. In case you wanted to look at the Chinese emperors, who was the one with the terracotta? Yeah, he was surrounded by a liquid pool of mercury. Why? Because he liked it. It kind of bubbled. No, because mercury is considered to be the elixir of immortality. We could ask him if it worked. Okay, so it goes back. A lot of the conquistadors that came to America were for the 3 Gs. Okay, God, glory, and gold. But there was an I in there, which was immortality. Hence, they thought Florida, ironically, was the fountain of youth. They actually bought in that there was a fountain. Hey, come on. This is the first real estate bubble. So there was a fountain of youth in Florida, and they went to Florida to find this fountain of youth. And they went to South America with the same idea, and they were running all over the place, wearing themselves out, looking for the fountain of youth. And they thought it was Florida. Now, if you look at retirement portfolios, you see there's still a lot of people who think Florida offers this, but hey. Okay, now, the guy who spent the $40 million on anti-aging, this is his quote, "Death has never made any sense to me." Hey, how can a person be there and then just vanish and not be there? So my friend's saying, he says, it's beside me. He said, do you know how smart these people are? I work with them all the time. These people are really smart. They're smarter than you are. And you're pretty smart. They're smarter than you are. He said, that's why they can make all this money with this stuff. He says, but I can't figure out how can they be so smart in this area and so dumb in this one. He says, this is my challenge. I'm trying to work this one out. He says, how can my friends say there? How can a person just be there and vanish and not be there? And he says, I would say to them, how could you not be there and just be there? How did that happen? That's like Hanshan in his memoirs. Hanshan says, I have never figured out how I was not there and suddenly I was there, and I came through my mom's belly. How did that happen? I still have 80 years old. I still haven't figured that out yet. Okay, so another one says, even, death makes me very angry. Okay. And premature death makes me angrier still. So they're getting these people together, throwing billions of dollars, much more money than NIH can give for any kind of research. And their idea is to conquer nature, specifically by extending the average human lifespan to the point where can we get to actually reversing and stopping death. This is where they're going, right? Okay? So I won't read you all the stuff they say, but it's really interesting. The great unfinished task of the modern world, another one, is to turn death from a fact of life into a problem to be solved. A problem towards whose solution I hope to contribute in whatever way I can. And there are people taking this money. And some of the real scientists are saying, you're being dishonest taking this money because there is no way you're going to come up with a solution to this. It's pseudoscience, but it's not pseudo money, it's real money. And so this now is driving, and there's this, on one hand, this incredible material success that these people enjoy, and they do enjoy incredible material success. I mean, even to the point where we can't imagine, unless you've touched up against it, how actually fabulous it is. Kings and queens and emperors of old would just salivate at what modern moguls of technology have at their disposal. It's unbelievable. I mean, for instance, like, do you want to play golf? I think so. It's a nice day. Well, call the jet off to Scotland to play at St. Andrews. Oh, we forgot our clubs. Well, let's just buy some, you know. How about, you want to relax? We'll go to Italy for dinner. I mean, you're thinking, no, this is, and that's just a day or two. So, and these aren't even on the high end. The high-end ones are thinking, I think I'll buy Italy. Why would I want to just go visit it? How much does it cost? Okay, well, in Italy, you might actually get a quote. Sorry, I didn't mean to go there. So they're throwing the money at this with the idea not that this will be universally enjoyable. Obviously, this is going to be very elite, the type of people that can afford this kind. So you're going to have even a funnier society where 1/10 of 1%, not only own most of it, but they're going to be the only ones that get this longer lifespan, and everybody else is going to sort of, geez. So there's the socialism. But that being aside, what I'm trying to point to is with this wealth, with this power, comes this incredible anxiety. So it's not, I'm contrasting the Sixth Patriarch, this is not liberation. Liberation that he's talking about is the letting go of the consciousness that clings, that wants, that fears. It's actually breaking through the riddle and seeing, yes, indeed, things come and go. This body comes and goes, life comes and goes. And then you work past that to see there is something that doesn't come and go. But it's not in this kind of technology science thing, it's something far greater. It's what the Buddha meant by nirvana. And it's a state where the coming and going still occurs, but there's no confusion and suffering and attachment to it. What is that about? This is the ancient formula for addressing that anxiety. Okay? And the modern formula for addressing it is to say we will conquer it. So instead of saying one needs to yield into the way of things and understand it from that flow, the kind of contemporary approach is to say, I will insist upon me conquering it from within my frame of self and what belongs from self. We're going to push this paradigm right into the very bowels of nature. And so the first problem with this is nature is going to recoil. And we can start to see this happening already. As we extend this dominance and control over the material world, we can see that it's backfiring. I just read today the Chinese have tried to mess with a certain kind of, what is it? Yeah, they're trying to go into the actual, what are they doing?
Germline, I think, something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but all the experiments backfire. But that won't stop. We'll keep going until we can actually, as some people have written, end the rule of nature, that this century will be the century where nature ends and we exert our dominance. Now, wow, this is the same people that brought you the economic collapse, the bad drugs, and all wars are now going to bring us this? Whoa, you're going to trust? Well, anyhow, without wisdom, this could be a very dangerous prospect because the powers to do that might be there, but the wisdom to do it in a kind, compassionate, and sensible way may not be there. That being said, the liberation that the Sixth Patriarch is talking about is a profound liberation that's quite the opposite. So tonight what I wanted to do is just share with you an ancient passage of somebody who dealt with death in a different way. Okay, so I have colleagues in history who are saying humankind, especially Western, was interested in religion because it answered the riddles and unsolved mysteries of life, birth and death and vicissitudes and whatnot. But with the advance of science and technology, the world of belief in the deities and the faith got less and less and less. As one rose, the other, to the point where, theologians would talk about the death of God or the decline of this belief. But I have colleagues in history who are writing interesting ideas that instead of getting rid of religion, we just transferred over to science and technology. And so the same structures of belief and moreover the same ambitions behind it are now driving science and technology with the idea that we will stop aging and mortality and eventually stop death, which was the hope of religion before. And now we're putting that transferred and we're calling it science and technology, but it's actually another kind of faith-based religion based on these psychological anxieties. And that's why these envelopes are being pushed in this way. The Buddha warned against this, by the way. He said the seeking outside for these solutions can only end in bitter regret, but that won't stop people from trying. So here's an ancient passage, and this isn't Buddhist, this is actually from a more Taoist tradition, and it's a reflection that happens to a sage at the death of his wife. And it's a really beautiful passage. I'll read the whole thing to you, but the point I'm trying to make in reading the passage is this might be a kind of expression of wisdom as opposed to and liberation. So here's how it goes. It says, Zhuangzi's wife died. When Weizhi went to convey his condolences, he found Zhuangzi sitting with his legs sprawled out, pounding on a tub and singing. Okay, not the normal mourning. Okay, and he wasn't singing. He was boom, 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 boom. And his friend says, you lived with her. She brought up your children and you grew old with you. It should be enough simply not to weep at her death, but pounding on a tub and singing, this is going too far, isn't it? He thinks either he's nuts or he's unfeeling to be just calmly sitting there humming. And Zhuangzi says to him, you're wrong. When she first died, do you think I did not grieve like anyone else? But soon, pondering on what happened, contemplating on the death, I told myself that in death, no strange new fate befalls us. When I look back to her beginning at the time before she was born, there wasn't anything. Not only the time before she was born, but the time before she had a body. And not only the time before she had a body, but the time before she had a spirit. In the midst of the jumble and wonder and mystery of all of that, a change took place and she had a spirit. And another change took place and she had a body. And another change took place and she was born. And now there's been another change and she's dead. This is really just taking it through. For not nature only, but man's or people's being has its seasons. It's just like the progression of spring, summer, fall, and winter. And as the seasons go through these progressions, so does the stages of our lives. Now she's going to lie down peacefully in a vast room. He's saying wherever she's returned to, the spirit, the matter, the energy. And if I were to follow after her, bawling and sobbing, it would show that I don't understand anything about the nature of things, so I stopped. This is a beautiful passage. Let me just give what I think might this be and you can think about it or not. If you're doing no thought, you don't want to. But anyway, think about it. So I stopped. So I stopped. And it seems to me that the graduation speeches of today's graduating classes shouldn't be, the world is open and you have unlimited horizons and powers, but it would be something like, know when to stop. Know when to stop. From this particular tradition, there's an expression that either Dranzer or Lao says, knowing when to stop is the key to wisdom. Knowing enough, not too little, not too much, knowing that optimal point. And so the question would be here, knowing where to stop in this kind of mania for power, science, technology, and whatnot, not to dismiss it, but knowing where that point of stopping is. And stopping doesn't mean desisting, as it means settling into harmony and balance. That's what stopping means. It doesn't mean throwing it out. And knowing that is probably the beginning of some kind of wisdom and maybe a counterbalance to this idea of unlimited power, unlimited possibilities. Nothing can hold us back. Now, I could launch, and I won't tonight, on the Greeks writing all kinds of interesting tragedies about that particular thing called hubris, not knowing when to stop. And they felt that this was, in fact, the tragedy of humankind was not knowing when to stop, and knowing when to stop was the golden mean, which what they meant by the harmony. So this isn't just the Eastern tradition, it's across. But enough, no names. You can probably find the article if you're interested and read more about it. So our conversation with my scientist friend will continue. He's just trying to think. And I told him, knowing when to stop, he's really wrestling with that now, because that's not something he's ever done. But he says, if I understand you right, even if I don't stop, I will be stopped, won't I? Yeah. Think about it. Okay, any announcements?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. We'd like to let you know about a retreat that the Berkeley Monastery is organizing during the second week of June. So it will be a good chance to contemplate and illuminate in the forest of Oregon. There'll be lots of trees and mountains and clouds and all these things.
Hurry while they last.
Already talked about tonight. So if you're interested, visit our website, oregon.berkeleymonastery.org. It's infinitely cheaper than a trip to Italy. Actually, it's free. Only cost will be transportation. Okay, but that's it. So if you're interested, please check out our website or you can talk to me later. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do the transference in English. What was the movie?
Transcendence.
Transcendence is a movie?
Yes. That's
Oh.
a terrible movie.
Terrible. Three thumbs down. Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding Li San Bao.